Now, what are we getting at here? We're saying in order to produce self-hatred in the black man, the white man had to degrade all things African. And this has not changed. To be entered into these jobs that we gloat so much about, we literally have to become black white people. Honorary white people. It literally requires the shedding of all that is African in us in order to gain these so-called jobs and these over black. Long before they found some men were black, Englishmen found in the idea of blackness a way of expressing some of their most ingrained values. No other color except white conveyed so much emotional impact. As described by the Oxford English Dictionary, there's those of us who like to speak Oxford English, right? That indicates the degree to which we have been educated. The meaning of black before the 16th century included deeply stained with dirt. This is the definer now. Soiled, dirty, foul, having dark or deadly purposes, malignant, pertaining to or involving death, deadly, baneful, disastrous, sinister. Isn't it interesting, the most deadly dead people in the world will project that deadness upon other people? The people who today threaten the earth with death, total death and annihilation, will make blackness appear to be the symbol of death and deadliness. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, in order for this people to rule, this must be the case. A reversal of values must take place so that the real culprit can hide his cupidities, and the one who's victimized must see himself as guilty. And you can see it then built into the system. Foul, iniquitous, atrocious, horrible, wicked, indicating disgrace, censure, liability to punishment, etc. They weren't even through with that. All this related to the word what? Blackness, Oxford English Dictionary, before the Englishmen got over to Africa. Indicating, and it goes on, blackness was an emotionally partisan color, the handmaid and symbol of baseness and evil, a sign of danger and repulsion. Embedded in the concept of blackness was its direct opposite. Because what we're saying here, if blackness is all these things, what must whiteness be? And the contrast begins. And this is the foundation. When you let another people be a validator of reality, when you let another people be the definer of what is good and what is bad, when you let another people name names, when you let another people write your dictionaries, when you let another people tell what symbolizes something else, and then when you sit there and accept their authority, then you're going to accept self-hatred. And it's that acceptance of this white man as authority that is the foundation, to a good extent, of the acceptance of ourselves as an object of hate by ourselves. No other color so clearly implied opposition. And it goes on. White and black connoted purity and filthiness, virginity and sin. Are you going to get married in your white gown? Virtue and baseness, beauty and ugliness, beneficence and evil, God and the devil. Is there any accident that some of these people have these white Jesuses painted in the back of their churches? I keep telling you that these churches are going to take you to hell. It's the preachers that are going to take you to hell, ladies and gentlemen. If you walk into a church with the white Jesus painted in that auditorium, you're being lied to your faces. And any preacher that puts a white Jesus in that church is a preacher that is already heading you to hell. Because he's disobeying the fundamental law that says, thou shalt not build unto me any graven images. And God knows that when you start projecting images in terms of ethnic groups, it has a psychology about it that creates inferiority and self-hatred, and it makes those who are not a part of that ethnic group believe that ethnic group is somehow divinely blessed and is godlike in this aspect. And many blacks believe in their heart of hearts that the white man is divine in some sort of way. That he's been divinely destined to rule over black people. Well, this is his world and we may as well adjust in it. Well, you know, so we accommodate this white man because the white man has usurped the image of divinity. And yet those of you who've read Ben Yochanan, those of you who've read the other black historians and read the true history of black, know, if you want to play this partisan game, this ethnic game, that the premier symbol of divinity was blackness. And therefore, the white man had to usurp that image and steal the image of divinity from black people. And there are many whites today who've stolen the image of divinity and the image of religion and so forth from black people. And the black people who do not know themselves then will be victimized by this usurpation and thievery. And we see it again happening in this particular instance. He goes on to talk about then that the European, that English discovery of black Africans. Let's look at another thing here for a moment. Whiteness moreover carries special significance for Elizabethan Englishmen. It was practiced particularly when complemented by red, the color of perfect human beauty, especially female beauty. This ideal was already centuries old in Elizabeth's time, and their fair queen was its embodiment. Her cheeks were roses in a bed of lilies. Elizabeth was naturally pale, but like many ladies then and since, she freshened her lilies at the cosmetic table. An adoring nation knew precisely what a beautiful queen looked like. Her cheek, her chin, her neck, her nose, this was a lily, that was a rose. Her hand so white as whale's bone, her finger tipped with cassidone, her bosom sleek as Paris plaster, held up 2 bowls of alabaster. And they go on about their whiteness. It was important, he goes on to say, if incalculably so, that English discovery of black African came at a time when the accepted standard of ideal beauty was a fair complexion of rose and white. Negroes not only failed to fit this ideal, but seemed to be the very picture of perverse negation. So again, we see the power of letting other people define who and what we are. We will see that if we do not organize ourselves as a majority in this world to take away the power of definition from this white man, we are going to suffer from self-negation and self-hatred throughout the time we do not get the courage to do so. We cannot let another people be our definer. In the book, The Negro's Image in the South, and it went on to say, in a democratic climate of opinion, slavery could be justified only by positing differences in the innate characteristics of the white and black races so great that the black race must appear to be incapable of freedom and thus destined to serve the white race forever. When the slaves were freed, men of the New South kept alive the pro-slavery thinking of their fathers, tinkering with it only to adjust it to altered conditions. Science, the scriptures, the experience of mankind, they still alleged, showed that black men were born to be servants. In this way, they reconciled democratic equality with servitude. In other words, how can you say all men are created evil and enslave other men? The only way you can do that then is to make those who are enslaved less than men. So in a democratic system, in order to maintain consistency, the white man then is forced to degrade the black person because he cannot justify, even according to his own constitution and theology and his own ideology, cannot justify slavery. And therefore he must reduce the humanity of black men in order to justify their servitude. In their effort to prove the Negro an inferior creature, white supremacists developed analogies supposedly derived from biology. This is where you call on science, like the science of psychology, which is used, of course, to justify what white people already think. So they found the Negro to have a thick head as a goat for absorbing blows, a skin that exuded copious perspiration with a distinctive stench, monkey-like arms, flat feet, a sensitive heel, a brutish physiognomy, all of which marked him as a creature useful for hard labor, but good for little else. The first step in this foray into biology was to find the Negro mentally dull. And now you get the association, you see, between physiognomy and psychology. The size of your nose indicates the size of your brain. The size of your feet indicates the size of your mentality. This comes from letting other people define who and what we are. Then to hunt for physiological characteristics which explain this trait. At about the age of puberty, it was discovered there occurred a rapid thickening of the skull. And the animal portion of the brain then became supreme, ruling over the adult Negro organism. This stunted cranial growth accounted for the black man's cultural immobility for thousands of years. In other words, that thick skull wouldn't let his brain grow bigger. As he was at creation's dawn, so he remained without initiative, without inventiveness, without the ability to move forward. The Negro had, so it seemed, always known about his thick head. For untold centuries, he had used it as a weapon of attack. As is the custom of rams. This is the definer here. And now the projecting. You see what is happening here? The taking of the person's very innate characteristics and negating them. You see? The Negro's face, like his cranium, revealed a great deal to the racist biologist. It expressed the simplicity of animal existence. Round features, tropical eyes, whatever kind of eyes those are, flashing smile, all marked the black man as tractable, emotional, intellectually torpid. Perhaps, wrote a Southern lady in 1878, an infusion of Caucasian blood would dissipate the simian type, improving the shape of the retreating forehead, changing the contour of the jaw, and giving the weight and power to the inactive brain. And there's some Negroes who came to believe that one. And many of them believe that to this moment. And many of us are familiar with lifting up the race, which meant, of course, lightening it up. Don't you bring home that black man here to me. Remember that? Many mothers' advice to a daughter. Don't marry one blacker than you. Because, of course, there was that scale of measurement. Some specialists concentrated attention on the nose, the hair, the eyes, and the ears in the hope that they would find evidence of the inferiority of the black race. Every aspect of the physiognomy is attacked and scandalized. The black man's skin, the most obvious mark of inferiority, was to believe to possess certain peculiar qualities other than distinctiveness in color. It secreted oil which kept it in a state of shine, thus deflecting intense solar rays. White science at its best here. The pigment carried heat into the system. They are driving water to the surface, which in evaporation dissipated body heat. You know, I can still hear black people say, well, you know, there are a lot of black people, there are a lot of heat. The Negro made an excellent worker because he was eminently a sweating animal. But this remarkable sweating capacity, however useful in the field, caused him to be a pariah in white society, objectionable in the jury box, the legislature, or the drawing room. During radical Reconstruction, the sweetness of loyalty perfumed the air of legislature and political meetings, and white men held their nose. There's an irony there, of course. Right. The sweetness of loyalty perfumed the air, and the white men held their nose. I grew up in an era where often whites held their nose, and just went right on into the 50s and early 60s as an indication of supposedly smell of black people, a degradation of black people. To make one quick quotation, another quotation from Black Over White, called Dismemberment, Physiology, and Sexual Perception, which, of course, as Rogers recognizes, at the very center often of the white man's relationship, particularly to the black man, that sexuality runs through that relationship. The white man's fears of Negro sexual aggression were equally apparent in the use of castration as a punishment in the colonies. And many of us familiar with the fact that many blacks, when they were lynched, were castrated. And many blacks today are psychologically castrated still. This weapon of desperation was not employed by angry mobs in the manner which became familiar after emancipation. In a few instances, particularly in the West Indies, individual planters emasculated their slaves, sometimes in outbursts of sadism involving hideous tortures, which planter society deplored but did not effectively control until the latter part of the 18th century. Far more significant, castration was dignified by specific legislative sanction as a lawful punishment in Antigua, the Carolinas, Bermuda, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. It was sometimes prescribed for such offenses as striking a white person or running away. Until 1722, South Carolina legally required masters of slaves running away for the fourth time to have them castrated. And in 1697, the Assembly ordered castration of 3 Negroes who had attempted to abscond through the Spanish in St. Augustine. So we see here again the degradation of the very sexual organs of black people. In some colonies, laws authorizing castration were worded so as to apply to all Negroes, whether free or slave. So you see, you don't escape castration regardless of your status, whether you're free or not. You're still open to it. As a legal punishment, castration was a peculiarly American experiment, but there was no basis for it in English law. Castration of Negroes clearly indicated a desperate generalized need in the white man to persuade themselves that they were really masters, in all ways masterful. And it illustrated dramatically the ease with which white men slipped over into treating their Negroes like their bulls and stallions, whose spirit could be subdued by emasculation. In some colonies, moreover, the specific sexual aspect of castration was so obvious as to undermine how much of the white man's insecurity vis-a-vis the Negro was fundamentally sexual. And we of course see that up to the very point today. And we can see this, an interesting little thing here is brought out from the London News, Connecticut, February 20th past. I think this is in the 18th century. By certain information from a gentleman, we were assured that some weeks ago, to the westward of that place, a very remarkable thing fell out, which we here relate as a caveat for all Negroes meddling for the future with any white man, with any white woman, lest they fare with the like treatment. And it is this: a Negro man met abroad an English woman, which he accosted to lie with, stooping down, fearing none behind him. A man observing this design took out his knife, before the Negro was aware, cut off all his unruly parts, smack and smooth. The Negro jumped up, roaring, and ran for his life. The black, now an eunuch, is alive and like to recover of his wounds and doubtless cured from any more such wicked attempts. And John goes on to say, doubtless a cure for whom? A cure, of course, for the white man himself. The concept of the Negro's aggressive sexuality was reinforced by what was thought to be an anatomical peculiarity of the Negro male. He was said to possess an especially large penis. The idea was considerably older than the exegesis of Ham's offense against his father, offered by the West African traveler Richard Jobson in 1623. Indeed, the idea without question antedated the settlement of America and possibly even the Portuguese explorations of the West African coast. Several 15th century cartographers, those that make maps, decorated parts of Africa with little naked figures, which gave the idea of graphic expression. And in due course in the 17th century, English accounts of West Africans were carefully noting the extraordinary greatness of the Negro's members, as it refers to. And we will continue a bit again in our next lecture when we look at France Fanon, when he talks about that the white man's encounter with the Negro, as he refers to it, is an encounter with the biological. And we meet again the assignations that are placed upon the very body of the black man. We must say then, in closing at this point, that it is not the fact that the white man degraded the black body that created self-hatred. It is not the scandalizing of the black character or the rewriting of black history so that black culture would appear to have contributed nothing to mankind or have nothing positive about it. In order for that, the degradation of the black body to be effectively realized into self-hatred, the black man had to accept what the white man said. He had to accept the values of the white man. He had to accept the white man's own criteria. If we did not accept it, if we did not believe it, if we did not use his value system and his concept of beauty, then we would not have been victimized by his scandalous descriptions of us as a people.